good evening. Welcome back to our program. As you know, I am Pretorius. And tonight, on this most spooktacular October evening, we will be paying our respects to the dead. None more so than many of Valve's own perished properties. But what happens if a game is left undead? Or perhaps left for dead? Will you make it to the end of our feature presentation to find out? Because tonight we will be discussing just that. Don't touch that clicker. Many of you won't make it, and I'm not betting on you doing so. The first game takes place in what I think is Pennsylvania, starring 4 main protagonists: Francis, Louis, Zoe, and Bill. While they might seem like generic character tropes, the nice one, the girl, the rude one, the old man, etc., I think their personalities and interactions shine through. Louis is the optimistic one, a total people pleaser and someone with a heart of gold who's always trying to make the most of a bad situation and rarely loses that hope. Francis is a former biker who views the apocalypse as the best thing to ever happen to him and is always making jokes at everyone else's expense or talking about how much he hates things. People who play Francis tend to get into trouble a lot, so it's a good thing he's indestructible. Zoe, unfortunately, lost both of her parents due to the infection. However, she loves horror films and video games and always thought the zombie apocalypse would come sooner or later. She's a lot of people's favorite pick given her quick-witted and charming personality. But my favorite is probably Bill. Bill is a Vietnam vet who was in the hospital when the end of the world happened. After fighting his way from the hospital to his house with nothing but a bone saw, he suited up one last time and prepared for something even worse than war. Now that we've met our heroes, let's meet our opponents. We've got the common infected. These are the most frequent zombies you'll encounter in the game. And trust me, the game loves throwing hordes upon hordes of these things at you. 1 zombie, or even 10 zombies by themselves, oh, that's not much to worry about. But soon you'll realize that having to fight 40 or 70 at a time is a very common thing. Then there's the special infected, the hunter, the smoker, and the boomer. The hunter can leap around up to hundreds of feet in the air and pounce on you, ripping your guts to shreds and incapacitating you unless a teammate helps out. Smokers do something a little bit similar, but instead of pouncing, they shoot out their rope-like tongue and tangle you up, requiring a buddy to come help out. The boomer is a huge fat guy that pukes on everything and attracts small hordes. Do not shoot it at close range because it'll explode and cover you with its stomach acids. Louis thinks that boomer bile is like catnip to zombies because it, attracts them very fast, and you can even see them fight each other when they themselves get covered in it. Those, however, are just the common special infected. There's also the witch, who will leave you alone and is docile as long as you don't flash a light on her or make too much noise. Then, there's the tank! This big beast is a hulking bullet sponge who would sooner pound you into red paste than eat you. On the harder difficulties, expect to see tons of these guys at once. The gameplay is the Valve standard, the first-person shooter. Utilizing a wide array of guns, you have to shoot your way to the end goal of either a safe house or a rescue vehicle at the end of each stage. Weapons are divided into tiers. Tier 1, you got the pump shotgun and the submachine gun. Don't get the submachine gun because it sucks. I always stick with the pump. Tier 2, you got the auto shotgun, the assault rifle, and the hunting rifle. When given the choice, I like to stick with the assault rifle because it just feels great. The auto shotgun has the burst fire and amazing impact, but really only comes in handy if you plan on getting up close and personal. As for the hunting rifle, do you like pressing your scroll wheel to use the scope? There is a mystical 3rd tier, but I'll touch on that in the sequel. Each campaign, on average, comprises of 3 or 4 maps or stages, with each stage, except for the final one, ending with a safe house where you can choose different guns or stockpile on ammo. There's also Molotov cocktails, which can provide some area defense with fire and make great ways to damage tanks. And also pipe bombs, which produce a loud beeping noise that attracts all zombies to wherever you throw it until it explodes! These are really good for if a friend just got puked on, or if you're trying to escape and a huge horde is all over you. Now it's time to talk about the campaigns. The original Left 4 Dead only launched with 4 of them, being No Mercy, Death Toll, Dead Air, and Blood Harvest. Later on, additional campaigns such as Crash Course and The Sacrifice were added later, making a total of 6. I'm gonna say right off the bat here, there is no point in playing the original Left 4 Dead. Left 4 Dead 2 comes with all of the maps from the first game, same characters and everything. If you buy the second game, you're essentially getting the first one for free. With that out of the way, No Mercy is how we start. Our goal is to reach Mercy Hospital, fighting through the apartment buildings, the subway stations, city streets, and finally the hospital itself, ending in a climactic rooftop battle where you wait for a rescue helicopter. This map features long, winding corridors and claustrophobic rooms packed with zombies, so it really gets you in the horror mood. Added on later is Crash Course, which is meant to bridge the gap between No Mercy and Death Toll. The helicopters crash thanks to your pilot turning undead, so now you must fight your way through incredibly dense city streets and a truck depot. This is also the shortest campaign with only 2 long and very tiresome maps packed to the brim with common and special infected. The short length and density of enemies was a deliberate choice by Valve so that players could apparently have a more intense game in versus mode, but I'll get to that much later. After they make their truck, they find their way in Riverside. Here, they go through traffic tunnels, the sewers, a small train yard followed by a church, then a brief walk through an abandoned town until finally you get to Riverside Park and a lake house. You get that amazing scenery of the burning city in the distance, and it just gives you this overbearing feeling of dread, like no matter what, you won't get a happy ending. After signaling for help, you escape on a boat, then somehow end up in a greenhouse in Newburgh, otherwise known as Dead Air. I think Death Toll is probably my personal favorite of the original maps. It isn't very challenging, even on harder difficulties, but the fun factor is cranked up to max. Back up to Dead Air though. Here, you start at a rooftop garden and see a plane crashing, which gives the survivors an idea to head to an airport. So you make your way across the rooftops, through an office complex, fight through the metro airport, and finally get to the runway, where you have to wait for an airplane to fill up with gas to get you out of there. You also get this awesome scene of a plane crashing, but finally, you're on your way. So sometime after their plane ride, they end up camping in the Allegheny National Forest, which is where Blood Harvest kicks off. Hearing of a possible safe zone at a farmhouse past a train yard, they just decide to head over there. This is the most open campaign, lots of big areas to explore with all kinds of items to be found. On your journey, you go through a wooded campsite area, an extensive underground tunnel system, another train yard, and finally, the big farmhouse. Here you wait for an armored vehicle to come rescue you, all while defending yourself. You can either hide out in the barn, the farmhouse itself, or on the huge hay pile in the cornfield. Or you can just do this little trick where you hide on the corner of the house and none of the infected can get you. This map, I think, really amps up the classic horror trope of survivors stuck in an abandoned house in the middle of nowhere. Really brings to mind the original Night of the Living Dead. But after waiting, you get picked up and you drive off into the horizon, concluding the original game. Well, that was the ending initially, but since then, things have changed. The Sacrifice came out. This was both a newly released campaign, along with a nearly 200-page tie-in comic. The survivors are rescued and brought to an isolated military base that has no idea about the special infected or just what they're up against. After an alarm is sounded attracting every zombie in a 100-mile radius, our heroes must fight for their lives as they escape the military and board a train that will take them to their new goal, the Florida Keys. This is where the Sacrifice begins, with only 3 maps, being the docks, a brick factory, followed by a giant cargo ship, and finally, a port town that we'll return to later. All is going well for the gang. Their hunt to find a boat and make it to the Keys seem to have succeeded, with the only obstacle in their way now being a lowered bridge that they have to raid. Sounds easy, right? After powering up 3 generators, it seems like things will be that way, and they'll finally have their happy ending. Their happy ending. But it's called the Sacrifice for a reason. One player has to stay behind and restart a generator so the others can escape. Canonically, that person is Bill Overbeck. After taking out horde after horde and 3 tanks, he's finally able to give his new family the safety they deserve, and he passes away after one last cigarette. Well, I think the Sacrifice is a really awesome campaign. The final battle is very annoying. Valve's idea of making this a big, huge event is just you starting 3 generators and rushing you with hundreds of commons and special infected and like 6 tanks. It's almost impossible to do this map single player, considering the bots don't do things like start generators or pick up gas cans. So from a single player perspective, God, this map is terrible. But as long as you have a strong team, you should be able to win with little issues. Alright, Left 4 Dead 2, the better game between them and easily the most fun. While this is the general consensus nowadays, believe it or not, this game originally had quite the controversy and even a call to boycott it. The original came out in 2008, and the sequel came out little under a year later. Fans were afraid that Valve would just abandon the original and not give it all the promised DLC. I won't go deeper than that, but just know that original fans didn't like this game very much. With that out of the way, new game, new survivors, new locations, new zombies, and new weapons to get through. So let's tackle all that one at a time. The location for this game is the good old South, taking place I think either 1 week or 2 weeks after the first game. There's some overlap happening. In Savannah, Georgia, a group of survivors hoping to get rescued find themselves being forced to fight for their lives through a burning hotel in hopes of finding an evac station. Meet your new gang, Ellis, Nick, Coach, and Rochelle. Ellis is a well-meaning southern boy who loves guns, killing zombies, and telling very long-winded stories. Nick is a former con artist who came to the South in hopes of taking advantage of all the dumb Southerners, kind of taking on Francis's role in that he's very antagonistic early on, but of course learns to love his new family and care about them. This guy, his friends call him Coach, and he takes on Bill's role of being the older, more experienced expert. He's a lot of people's favorite pick, and he has some of the funniest dialogue in the game. Last, but not least, is Rochelle, who was doing a news story on the infection before getting involved in it herself. Everyone knows that Rochelle used to be the most bland, uninteresting character in the entire game. This was due to more than half of her voice lines just being cut for unknown reasons, leaving her as this kind of empty husk with nothing interesting to say and just providing the role of a fourth player slot. Recent events though, that's all changed with the release of the Last Stand update. All of her cut lines have been restored, allowing her klutzy but well-meaning personality to finally shine through. I'll touch on that update a little later down the pipe, but for now, let's talk about the weapons. Of course, all the weapons from the first game return. Tier 2 weapons, however, have been increased with the addition of the AK-47, the sniper rifle, the combat shotgun, and the combat rifle. Also in this game is the mystical third special tier. Here, you get the grenade launcher and the M60 machine gun. You can get all Adrian Shepard up in here. Be careful though, because you can never replenish the ammo of the special weapons, so if you're gonna use them, you have to commit. This game also introduces melee weapons that the first game didn't have. The only thing it had was this dainty little shove that needed a cooldown. Here, you got a baseball bat, a machete, a fire axe, a cricket bat, if you feel like being British, a frying pan, a nightstick, a guitar, a rather groovy chainsaw, and the ninja sword, otherwise known as a katana. The fire axe is my go-to, seeing as how it has great reach and can mow down commons like there's no tomorrow. The best though, of course, is the katana. It has the best damage, the best reach, but it's very rare. I always go for melee weapons the first chance I get. Having a single or even a double pistol do not do it for me, and I think that having a close range weapon in a first-person shooter does nothing but help variety and replayability. It also helps that because this game loves crowding you with infected, nothing clears them away faster. That's not all though, because this game also has a form of power-ups, being the incendiary and explosive ammo upgrades. These upgrades are best paired with high clip size weapons, but make for excellent damage multipliers when paired with a shotgun. Then, there's laser sights. These improve your gun's overall accuracy, decrease weapon spread and whatnot, and can usually help you aim better thanks to you being able to track your shots. These things are the rarest spawn in the game though, so you better pray that you've got a good weapon when you find some of these, otherwise you'll just have to hold on to the shitty one just because of its upgrade. But with weapons out of the way, what are you gonna shoot with them? Well, the smokers, hunters, boomers, tanks, and witches are back, but new to this game are the chargers, jockeys, and spitters. Spitters are disgusting abominations that hurl acid at you and make for area denial that really stings. Chargers are for ambushing. They charge around corners and incapacitate you. Wait for a teammate to help you up. Then there's jockeys, which you can always hear because of their horrible laughter. They hop on top of you and ride you, hence the name jockey. They'll often steer you towards danger or away from your group, so you'll need someone to either shoot it off or shove it off you. That's it for the new special infected though. Like all the weapons I just mentioned, all these new guys can also be found when playing the first game's map, so it really helps to shake things up, and I like it a lot. The campaigns we have to go through this time are much more visually distinct and unique compared to the first game. You've got Dead Center, Dark Carnival, Swamp Fever, Hard Rain, and The Parish. In Dead Center, we go through a burning hotel, abandoned streets, raid a gun store and deliver cola, explore an infested mall, and finally fuel up a stock car and ride out in style. This is a campaign I always replay when I'm in the mood to play this game. Either this one or Death Toll. I just think this is a really fun, tightly designed campaign. And even though the finale is just getting a bunch of gas cans while trying to avoid the infected, it's still really fun. Higher difficulties can make the finale almost impossible if you're playing with random people, so it just really encourages teamwork and structure. Next up is Dark Carnival. However, later down the line, along the same time that we got the Sacrifice, we also got the Passing, an in-between campaign where the survivors of the first game meet up with our current group. This takes place shortly after the Sacrifice. I'd say maybe one day later, or maybe even an hour later. I say that because the bridge is raised and Bill is dead, which all three of them will comment on. Lewis was injured, so he only helps out at the end with a big machine gun, which will really come in handy. The current gang needs to drive their car across that bridge. But after all the work it took to raise it originally, Zoe and the others do not want to just immediately lower it again. So we got another campaign on our hands. Going through a park, the sewers, and finally, the same port from the Sacrifice where we once again have to power that same generator that Bill died restarting. You can even find his dead body in the generator room and take his gun, but that's just disrespectful. That's all there is to this one, but the interactions between the first and second group of survivors is really great, and they have so much dialogue that you probably won't hear all of it. After the second group of survivors moves on, Zoe, Lewis, and Francis take the yacht that Bill sacrificed himself for and head out to the Florida Keys, their long journey finally over. Next up is Dark Carnival, where after their car is stopped because of traffic pileup, they're forced to make their way to an abandoned amusement park to find shelter. You got a merry-go-round, a tunnel of love, a roller coaster, a huge slide, and all other kinds of dumb mini-games. This all culminates with a badass rock concert as you try to survive while waiting for a helicopter to notice the pyrotechnical finale. Dark Carnival is probably my favorite campaign, barely beating the Passing at Dead Center. This finale is a big highlight and really surprised me the first time I played it. Coach's plan works, and they're picked up by a helicopter to continue their journey to New Orleans, which is apparently the last city standing. The plan kind of fails though, because the chopper pilot turns mid-flight and is shot by Nick. This keys into Swamp Fever, where you don't really have a goal other than getting out of the swamp and trying to survive. But sadly, this is the first campaign where I get the overwhelming feeling of, aren't I done yet? Most of the scenery and stages blend together, with only the first and last feeling very visually distinct. You're spending most of your time trudging through swamp water and going through abandoned buildings. Finally, at the end, you make it to an old plantation house and signal help from Virgil and his boat. So after fending off mobs of the undead and quite a few tanks, you make your escape. Boats need gas though, which segues into Hard Rain. What starts as a quick trip to just go get gas quickly turns into a trek through an empty small town, a sugar factory, a cornfield, all while rain is slowly coming down harder and harder. By the halfway point, it's time to turn around and come back, repeating the same levels but in reverse now that you've got the gas. This time, you're constantly bombarded with hard thunderstorms that block visibility and obscure sound cues of the special infected. Not to mention there's like 30 witches on this map, so tread very carefully. The thunderstorms have not let up, and things only get worse from here on out, because now the ground is flooded and limits your movement. After what feels like forever, Virgil comes back and you live to fight another day. With Hard Rain done and over with, Virgil finally drops us off at our prime destination, New Orleans, and surprise, surprise, it is not the safe haven we were promised. The military is bombing the shit out of this place, and it's completely overrun with infected. When you get to the safe room, you'll notice this first chapter is very short. That's because the parish was originally only going to have 4 chapters, not 5, with the first chapter being split into 2. This is because the parish, or the parish, however you want to pronounce it, this is because the parish was the very first campaign designed in the game, and it clearly shows because the devs weren't able to make the maps as big as they wanted, which is why the waterways and the park are split into separate chapters. The park is a fairly simple level. You navigate through a park where a witch or a tank will spawn. After you leave the park, you find a CETA decontamination trailer and piles of dead bodies. This is when it hits our survivors that the military is shooting people, not just zombies. Then comes the cemetery, and this is probably the worst level in the parish, second maybe to the finale. The cemetery is home to some empty suburban homes, a dive into the sewers, an impound lot with over a dozen car alarms that will spawn a horde each and every time, and maybe even a tank, and finally, the randomly generated and constantly changing cemetery. This is when the director shows how much of a dick he is by changing the level layout of the final stretch between 4 possible combinations. When you manage to beat the cemetery, you get a bit of a break with the quarter. This level actually isn't that bad. Lots of tight spaces, bars, apartments, an annoying horde battle that activates when you try to move a parade float. And once you're done with that, you move on to the finale. The bridge. The bridge is what this entire campaign has been teasing you with. You can see it in almost every level, and the survivors always make remarks about how they have to get there in order to be rescued. Once you get there, you find a dead Air Force pilot. Thankfully, though, he has a radio. You'll be rescued, as long as you can make it to the other side of this bridge. You just have to lower it, similar to how the original survivors had to lower their bridge in the Sacrifice. Valve really likes bridges. What follows is a massive hike across a bridge with multiple paths, brimming with fallen cars, insta-kill pits, jockeys and smokers all over the place, at least 2 or 3 tank fights, and hundreds upon hundreds of common infected. There's also a mounted gun you can use towards the end, but since the tank spawns behind it, there's no point in using it. At the end, you board a helicopter, watch the bridge get blown up, and the final credits come down. The end. That's the end of Coach and the others, with no word on whatever happened to them. Unlike the first game's team, we at least know that Lewis, Zoe, and Francis made it to the Keys and presumably lived there forever in peace. We still have no idea whatever happened to Nick, Coach, Ellis, or Rochelle, and that kind of bugs me. The bridge took me many tries on my first attempt. It didn't help that I was playing with random people, which meant many rage quits and conflicting strategies. But after what felt like hours, I finally made it across that stupid hunk of concrete. Okay, I just complained for like 2 minutes, but I don't think that by itself it's hard. It's only artificially hard because it comes at the end. You're beat to hell, your resources are scarce, and here comes this huge challenge that you might not be 100% prepared for. Getting here with great gear and plenty of supplies to spare shows that this isn't some impossible mega challenge, but it will certainly test your skills. Not quite done yet, because there's also Coldstream, which was Valve's first and last attempt to make more maps for this game. Every stage in the campaign ends with a crescendo event, which spawns in a massive horde to fight your way through. Coldstream is okay, but it isn't remarkable or canon, so I'm not going to spend any time on it other than that brief exchange. Moving on. Let's finish this up by discussing the Last Stand update, a community-created, Valve-endorsed, official patch for the game. It brought over 30 new survival and scavenge maps, hundreds of bug and exploit fixes. It also comes with new field of view options, new view model changes, new and previously unused voice lines such as Rochelle's, 2 new melee weapons, restoring the original game's common and special infected designs when you play on their maps, and a brand new campaign that takes the previously survival-only map and turning it into 2 full chapters. My thoughts? I found the campaign to be very fun since it uses the first game's aesthetic and uses it in nice and creative ways. It was clear that the team behind it understood what makes these games fun and why we like them. The first chapter takes you through a riverbed and a junkyard. The second chapter is where the original Last Stand community survival map took place, a giant lighthouse base that overlooks the beach. Here you have to do the standard wait for a rescue shtick until halfway through it turns into a scavenge map, with you getting gas cans to power the generator up to turn the lighthouse back on. Once you do that, you fend off more zombies until 3 tanks come at you all at once, with that awesome, badass metal remix of the tank theme pounding in your ears. You just gotta run and make it to the boat as fast as you can. This update does bring in some minor issues though. You can tell some of the voice lines were left unused for a reason, though it's all worth it, seeing as how again, Rochelle finally has a true personality. See, if I were in the business of giving games scores, I'd give Left 4 Dead 2 a 9 out of 10. But I'm not, so instead, I give it 1 artifact out of Ricochet. Quite the spine-chilling event, wouldn't you say? Is anyone still alive? Good, because now, the true terror can begin. As we speak, I've already launched a plague affecting every viewer in their homes. And the only cure is to stay glued to your screen, watching hundreds of thousands of more hours of our program until the end of time. There's nothing better than a captive audience.